Think the Middle Ages were all about knights, chivalry, and pious monks? Think again. Behind the castle walls, people were doing things so scandalous, so bizarre, that they make modern dating apps look like child's play. From couples sewn into sacks for chaste sleepovers to priests secretly running sprawling brothel empires, this was a world where desire ruled in the shadows. Stay tuned, because what you're about to learn will completely shatter everything you thought you knew about medieval love and lust. Section 1. Beneath the Veil of Piety. Everyone thinks of the medieval era as a time of unshakable faith, rigid morality, and endless prayers whispered in cold stone chapels. Peasants kneeling in the mud, nobles swearing chastity before the church, monks locked away in monasteries. At least, that's the story we've been told. But peel back the veil of religious dogma, and what you'll find is far more chaotic, an age obsessed with lust, fertility, and power plays carried out through the most intimate acts imaginable. The medieval world wasn't merely a theater of war and politics. It was a stage for sexual spectacle, where human desire clashed with divine law, often in the most bizarre ways possible. Imagine young lovers bound in sacks and tied to beds, aristocrats forced to consummate marriages under the watchful eyes of dozens of witnesses, priests secretly running sprawling prostitution networks, and kings scheduling their lovemaking according to the positions of the stars. These weren't isolated scandals. This was the culture. And tonight, in the flickering torchlight of an ancient hall, we begin our descent into a world so strange and unsettling that it will make modern dating apps look like children's games. The tale begins in the quiet village of Brunvale, where a young farm girl named Elspeth nervously prepared for a ritual her parents swore was a harmless tradition, meant to secure her future. What they didn't tell her was that this night would bind her fate to a stranger, quite literally. Section 2. The Binding of Lovers. The villagers of Brunvale called it binding, though outsiders mocked it as bed-sacking. It was a local custom said to prevent sinful urges, while still allowing young couples to get to know one another. The practice was as awkward as it was misguided. A boy and a girl, chosen by their families as potential spouses, would be sewn into a single heavy linen sack. Their arms pinned to their sides, their legs straightened, their bodies pressed closely together but unable to truly touch. Elspeth's mother fussed with the final stitches, her needle moving quickly as she whispered a prayer. "You mustn't be afraid," she said, though her tone carried a trace of guilt. "This is the way our mothers and grandmothers did it. The gods watch over bound lovers." Elspeth swallowed hard. Across the room, her soon-to-be companion, Rowan, sat pale and silent, clearly terrified himself. The two had barely exchanged more than a few shy greetings before tonight. Is it true there will be a board between us?" Rowan asked, voice cracking. Her father, a stern man with hands like gnarled roots, barked a laugh. "Aye, boy. A thick plank right down the middle of the bed. You'll share warmth but not sin. Now stop fretting." The chastity plank, as the villagers jokingly called it, was a heavy piece of oak polished smooth by years of use. It was placed between the couple once they were laid down, creating a wall so neither could accidentally brush against the other during the night. The binding wasn't private. Half the village came to watch. Elspeth's cheeks burned as her neighbors cheered and gossiped. Some shouted crude jokes, others made bets on how long the couple would remain pure. When she was finally lifted and carried to the bed beside Rowan, the room erupted into laughter and applause. As the sack tightened around her and the plank pressed coldly between them, Elspeth whispered through the coarse fabric. "Rowan? Are you awake?" "I," came his muffled reply. "This is madness, Elspeth. My cousin told me bindings rarely end without someone finding a way over the plank." Her heart skipped a beat. Surely not. But he didn't answer. What Elspeth didn't know was that many bindings ended in scandal. The sack was never enough to stop nature's course, and pregnancies were so common among bound couples that village priests had begun performing quick marriages at dawn to hide the shame. As the torches burned low and the room fell silent, Elspeth lay trembling, listening to Rowan's breathing on the other side of the plank, wondering if this night would seal her fate, or ruin her forever. Section 3. The Night of Broken Rules. The hall grew colder as the hours passed, the laughter and chatter of the villagers fading into the distant murmur of wine through the cracks in the thatched roof. Elspeth lay stiff in her sack, every muscle aching from the unnatural position. Her heart pounded so loudly she feared Rowan might hear it. Through the fabric barrier, his voice came softly, almost conspiratorial. "Elspeth, are you still awake?" "Yes," she whispered back, her breath catching. Her parents had assured her that speaking was allowed, even encouraged, but the tremor in Rowan's voice made her chest tighten with unease. "I can't feel my arms," he muttered, shifting slightly. The sack rustled, and the plank between them creaked. "I think this is cursed. Why do our families insist on this madness?" Elspeth bit her lip. "They say it keeps us pure. That if we survive the night without temptation, it proves we're worthy of marriage." Rowan let out a bitter laugh. "Pure? You and I, trapped together like slaughtered pigs, breathing the same air, pressed so close we can hear each other's hearts? This feels like temptation's playground, not its prison." His words stirred something inside her, a dangerous mix of fear and curiosity. She tried to focus on anything else, but the sack was suffocating, the air thick and hot. For a moment, she imagined tearing the stitches apart and running into the cool night air. Then Rowan whispered, I've heard stories, Elspeth, of couples who wriggled free." Her breath caught. "Rowan, no? We mustn't. The gods are watching." "Are they?" His tone turned mocking. "Or is it just the elders and their silly rules, meant to keep us obedient? My cousin told me his binding ended with a kiss, and more." Elspeth's body went rigid. "A kiss." The words sent heat rushing to her face. "That's a sin. So is lying." Rowan shot back, his voice suddenly low and urgent. "Tell me you've never wondered what it would be like, Elspeth. Tell me, and I'll stay still." She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. The silence between them was louder than any confession. Minutes passed. Then, with deliberate slowness, Rowan began to wiggle against the sack's seams. The fabric stretched. "Elspeth," he hissed, "the stitches are weak near my shoulder. I think I can tear them." "No! If they find us." "They won't." A final twist, and with a ripping sound, Rowan's arm burst free. Elspeth gasped, heart hammering. He grinned through the darkness, even though she couldn't see it. "One arm free. Just one. That's not so bad, is it?" But it was bad. Terribly bad. Moments later, the plank shifted. Rowan pressed his freed hand against it and whispered, "We don't have to cross it, just a touch. Just once." Elspeth's trembling hand moved toward his instinctively before she snatched it back. "No," she breathed. "Please, Rowan, don't make me." A sudden crash echoed through the hall. The heavy door swung open, and torchlight flooded the room. "Elspeth! Rowan!" her father roared, storming inside with several elders behind him. "The spirits warned me of your disobedience." Rowan froze, his hand inches from Elspeth's. The sack was torn, the plank tilted, their shame undeniable. The elders gasped, already whispering accusations. By dawn, half the village would know. Elspeth's life was no longer her own. The binding ritual had not preserved her purity. It had shattered her reputation, setting in motion a chain of events that would draw the attention of nobles, priests, and even kings far beyond Brunvale's muddy fields. Section 4. The Feast of Forbidden Desires. 2 weeks later, Elspeth stood in the grand hall of Lord Mael's keep, far from her village. She had been sent there as a form of punishment, or protection, depending on who you asked. Rowan had been pressed into military service, while Elspeth was placed in the care of the local nobility to prevent further scandal. Lord Mael was known for his generosity, and his peculiar appetites. The hall glittered with gold and crimson banners, the air thick with the scent of roasting meats and exotic spices. It was the night of the Feast of Fire and Flesh, a celebration whispered about in nearby towns as both decadent and dangerous. Elspeth, dressed in borrowed silks, stood at the edge of the room, wide-eyed. Servants carried trays piled high with strange dishes. Skewered birds drizzled with honey, oysters swimming in cream, and something far stranger, a steaming platter of what looked like pale, glistening spheres. "What are those?" Elspeth asked the servant beside her. The girl smirked. "Stones of virility," she said with a wink. "From young boars freshly harvested. Lord Mela says they stoke the fires of passion." Elspeth's stomach churned. People were eating animal testicles as if they were delicacies. The guests devoured them with gusto, their faces flushed, their laughter loud and bawdy. At the head of the table, Lord Mailer himself raised a goblet of spiced wine. "To desire," he proclaimed, "the force that builds kingdoms and topples empires. Tonight we feast not for survival, but for pleasure." The crowd cheered, pounding their cups against the table. Elspeth shrank back, horrified as she watched a young noblewoman lick saffron sauce from her companion's fingers in a gesture far too intimate for a public gathering. Beside her, a plump, red-faced man laughed. "You're new here, aren't you, girl? Don't look so shocked. These feasts are tradition. The ingredients are carefully chosen to encourage certain urges." He leaned close, his breath reeking of wine. "By the end of the night, you'll understand." Elspeth wanted to flee, but before she could move, a servant thrust a plate into her hands. The dish held sparrow brains mixed with almonds and cinnamon, their aroma strangely sweet. "Eat," the servant urged. "It's considered rude to refuse." Her hands shook. She remembered Rowan's words, his mocking tone about temptation. And now, surrounded by nobles whose wealth allowed them to indulge every desire, she realized temptation wasn't confined to poor villages. Here, it was cultivated, celebrated, and consumed, one forbidden bite at a time. Section 5. The Spectacle of the Bridal Chamber. The feast dragged on late into the night, each course more bizarre than the last. Elspeth's head swam with the mingled scents of saffron, honey, and wine. She forced herself to take small bites, terrified that refusing might insult Lord Mailer and bring punishment upon her village. When the final platter was cleared, the great hall fell silent. Lord Mailer stood, his golden cloak shimmering in the torchlight, and raised his hand for attention. "Honored guests," he boomed, his deep voice echoing against the vaulted ceiling. "Tonight is not merely a feast. Tonight you shall witness the sealing of a sacred alliance." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Elspeth frowned, clutching her borrowed shawl tighter. A young couple, barely older than she and Rowan, were escorted into the hall by attendants. The bride's face was pale beneath her jeweled veil, her hands trembling as she clutched a small bouquet of white flowers. The groom, dressed in crimson velvet, looked equally terrified. "This is Lord Cedric and Lady Marwen," Mailer declared. "Their union binds two great houses and ensures peace in our lands. But as tradition demands, a union must be proven." Elspeth's stomach turned cold. She had heard rumors of noble bedding ceremonies, but she'd never believed them. Surely people did not actually watch. But the crowd erupted in cheers, stamping their feet in anticipation. Attendants stepped forward, leading the couple toward a massive bed draped in red and gold, set up in full view of everyone. Elspeth's breath caught as she realized there were no curtains, no privacy at all. They cannot mean to," she stammered. A woman beside her, older and sharp-eyed, gave a humorless laugh. "Oh, they mean it, girl. A marriage isn't legal until it's consummated before witnesses. That way, there's no dispute over heirs or dowries. It's politics, not pleasure." The bride whimpered as female relatives swarmed around her, stripping away her elaborate gown layer by layer. At the same time, the groom's male relatives did the same to him, clapping him on the back and offering crude jokes. The crowd leaned forward eagerly. Some even placed wagers on how long the act would take. Elspeth couldn't look away. The couple were finally laid upon the bed, their faces crimson with shame. Lord Mailer himself stepped forward, holding a heavy brass bell. By the laws of the realm, he intoned, we witness the sacred joining of two souls and two bloodlines. Let the act commence. The hall erupted into raucous laughter and applause. The young groom trembled so violently he nearly fell from the bed. One of the older men muttered, loud enough for all to hear, if he fails, the marriage can be annulled. And then perhaps I shall take his place. Elspeth's breath came in shallow gasps. She wanted to run, to block her ears, but her legs felt rooted to the floor. The humiliation was unbearable to watch, yet this was normal for these people. As the couple moved beneath the sheets, the witnesses did not merely watch. They commented, offering unsolicited advice and jeering encouragement. When it was finally over, the attendants rushed forward to hold up the bedclothes for inspection. The crowd surged forward, craning their necks to see the stains that would prove the bride's virginity. Elspeth turned away, nauseated. But Lord Malor's booming laughter cut through the chaos. Success! He cried, raising his goblet. The union is sealed, the alliance secure. The crowd cheered wildly, but Elspeth felt only horror. To these nobles, love was not sacred, it was entertainment, a tool for power. As the celebration resumed, she stumbled toward the doors, desperate for air. But before she could escape, a hand seized her arm. It was Lady Serana, Malor's cunning and sharp-tongued sister. You saw what happened tonight, Serana said, her eyes glittering. And now you understand the truth. In this world, desire is not private. It is weaponized. Elspeth shivered under her piercing gaze. You will learn to play their game, Serana continued smoothly, or you will be destroyed by it. Section 6. The Astrologer's Ledger. In the weeks that followed, Elspeth discovered just how literal Lady Serana's words had been. Every aspect of noble life revolved around carefully managed appearances and calculated displays of intimacy. Even the act of conceiving an heir was treated like a political campaign. One evening, Serana summoned Elspeth to a small tower chamber filled with scrolls, candles, and the pungent scent of strange herbs. At the center of the room sat an elderly man in star-patterned robes, his bony fingers tracing symbols across a parchment chart. This is Master Belhar, Serana said, gesturing toward him. The finest astrologer in the realm. He advises our family on matters of conception. Elspeth blinked, confused. Conception? Belhar chuckled, his toothless grin unsettling. My dear child, bringing new life into this world is not merely an act of passion. It is a delicate ritual that must be timed with the heavens themselves. He beckoned her closer, pointing to the intricate star map. Here, the house of Venus aligns with Mars, excellent for vitality. But beware when Saturn ascends, for then the seed may be cursed. Serana rolled her eyes. Spare her the riddles, Belhar. Tell her plainly. The astrologer nodded solemnly. Noble couples do not simply choose when to conceive. They consult me. I calculate the precise hour, the proper direction for the bed, even the colors the couple must wear. Only then can they be certain of producing strong, worthy heirs. Elspeth's mouth fell open. You mean, they schedule their intimacy? Schedule? Belhar laughed. No, child. They orchestrate it. A night of union may require weeks of preparation. Serana smirked. And if a family wishes for a male heir, there are special techniques. Belhar leaned forward, lowering his voice. The man must bind his left testicle tightly with a cord, for boys are believed to come from the right. Meanwhile, the woman must wear a talisman blessed under the waxing moon. Elspeth stared at him in disbelief. That cannot be true. Truth is irrelevant, Serana said coolly. What matters is belief. These rituals hold power because everyone acts as though they do. Belhar unfurled a scroll filled with complex calculations. The next favorable night for conception is 3 weeks hence, he murmured. The couple must begin fasting tomorrow, avoid intimacy until then, and recite these prayers to Saint Callistus each morning. As Elspeth listened, a strange realization crept over her. Even the most private act between two people was not their own. It belonged to the stars, the priests, and the court. Desire itself had been transformed into a tool of governance. Section 7. The Church of Shadows. Elspeth's unease grew with every passing day in Lord Mayless court. She had witnessed the humiliation of noble couples, the cold calculation of conception rituals, and feasts that turned hunger into lust. But nothing prepared her for what Lady Sir Anna revealed next. One moonless night, Sir Anna led Elspeth through a narrow passage beneath the keep, their steps echoing against damp stone. "Where are we going?" Elspeth whispered, clutching her cloak. "To the beating heart of our realm's greatest hypocrisy," Sir Anna replied darkly. "The Church preaches purity and condemns sin. But sin is their greatest business." They emerged into a hidden courtyard lit by red lanterns. The air was thick with the sound of laughter, moans, and the clinking of coins. Dozens of women, dressed in crimson veils, moved between richly dressed men, their faces painted with forced smiles. "This," Sir Anna said, sweeping her hand, "is the Sanctuary of Mercy. Officially, it is a refuge for fallen women. In truth, it is a brothel, one of many run by the priests themselves." Elspeth's jaw dropped. "But the sermons, the rules." "Lies," Sir Anna spat. "The Church collects taxes from every transaction here. Their coffers overflow with gold earned from the very desires they condemn." A corpulent priest waddled past, his fingers heavy with jeweled rings. He gave Sir Anna a sly smile. "Ah, my lady. Bringing fresh recruits, I see." Elspeth recoiled, but Sir Anna gripped her arm tightly. "Do not speak," she hissed. "Here, even whispers can cost lives." As they passed through the brothel, Elspeth saw young women who had been forced into service to repay debts or settle family disputes. Some were barely older than she was. The men who visited wore masks, not to hide their shame, but to flaunt their power. For in this place, anonymity was its own luxury. When they finally returned to the keep, Elspeth's hands were trembling. "How can the people worship priests who do this?" Sir Anna's expression was grim. "Because they are told to. And because fear is stronger than truth." Elspeth realized then that the corruption of Brunvale's binding rituals was nothing compared to the sprawling machinery of desire and deceit controlled by the Church and nobility. Here, sex was not simply a private act, it was currency, and everyone was paying the price. Section 8. Breaking the Chains. Elspeth knew she couldn't stay silent. She thought of Rowan, pressed into the army to cover the village's shame, and of the terrified bride forced to perform before a jeering crowd. She thought of the women trapped in the Sanctuary of Mercy, their bodies sold to fill the Church's coffers. But what could one village girl do against powers so vast? As dawn broke, Elspeth stood in the highest tower of the keep, the wind whipping her hair. Sir Anna approached, her sharp gaze softening for once. "You've seen the truth now," Sir Anna said quietly. "Most people never do. Most don't want to." Elspeth clenched her fists. "If no one fights back, nothing will ever change." Sir Anna sighed. "Then fight, but understand this, they will destroy you if they can. The moment you speak, you become a threat." "I don't care," Elspeth said, her voice steady. "Let them try." That night, as Lord Mayless court celebrated another grotesque feast, Elspeth slipped away with a group of villagers loyal to her family. They set fire to the Sanctuary of Mercy, freeing as many captives as they could. The flames roared high, illuminating the night sky like a beacon. The priests screamed for vengeance. Lord Mayless swore that the culprit would be found and executed. But no one betrayed Elspeth's name. As chaos consumed the court, she fled into the wild hills, where Rowan waited for her. His uniform was torn, his hands calloused from battle, but his eyes shone with fierce determination. "Elspeth," he breathed, pulling her close. "I thought I'd lost you." "Not yet," she whispered. "But we have work to do." Together, they vowed to expose the corruption they had witnessed. They would travel from village to village, spreading the truth, gathering allies, and striking at the heart of the systems that turned desire into chains. The path ahead was perilous, and victory far from certain. but for the first time since the night of the binding, Elspeth felt free.